In this video, I'm going to show you a valid use case for event capturing. If you don't already know what event capturing is, I'm going to make a separate video on that and I'll link it below, so stay tuned. But just to give you a quick idea of it, when events are triggered in the DOM, what you have is a capturing and bubbling phase. You have the capturing phase where the event goes from the top to the bottom, so from the HTML to the body to the div until it gets to the target, in this case clicking a button, and then after that click event has been handled on the button, the event is going to bubble back to the top. So from button it goes back to div, body, HTML. Now when it comes to capturing and bubbling, a lot of times many people use bubbling. So if you're wondering when do I actually need to use capturing, well, I have an example for that. Okay, here I have this default image example, and the idea here is we have this image coming from Unsplash, but let's say this image is a broken link. Maybe let me just put a D here. Now what we have here is a broken image element. When an image fails to load, an error event is triggered, which means we can listen to that error event and then set a default image for our image element, and that's what I'm doing here. So I query all the images, and then for each of the images I add an event listener. Error, I'm going to change the source of that image to default image, and I'm also going to add a class of default. Basically what that class is doing is adding a grayscale of 1. Now this default image is something I have right here on my server, Unsplash empty image. So when I refresh, because that image did not load successfully, I now have this default image here. I made a video of this and I posted it on Instagram, and one of the comments that I got a lot was, what if you have 1000 images? That means you're going to have 1000 event listeners. I don't think that's the wisest decision to make. So one way we can improve this is, instead of having 1000 event listeners, we can have only one event listener, and then we use event delegation. Okay, here we have 6 images. Instead of having 6 error event listeners for the 6 images, I can have just one event listener, and I'm going to put it on a parent that they share. So these 6 images share one parent, which is this div here. So I'll come here now, get the images block, and then I can add an event listener of error on this images block. Let me remove this capturing true for now. Let's say we are working with bubbling, and then I check if the event.target.nodename is equals to img, then I know that it is an img element that received this error event. And then I can come here to change the src of the target to default image and change the class list to add default. All the images are looking good, but then let's say this first image has a broken link, the third image has a broken link, and the last image has a broken link. Now if I refresh, this is what we have. Why isn't the default image set on these images? Well, the reason for that is because the error event is not cancelable, and more importantly, it does not bubble. But a click event bubbles. So if I should come here and say click, if I come here and refresh, now when we click on this, you see we have the default image. If we click on this default image, click on this, click on this, click on this, click on this, we have the default images applied everywhere. That is because the click event bubbles, and that way we can have event delegation where this div is going to handle the click event for these 6 images. So instead of having 6 event listeners, I only have 1 event listener. But with the error event, it does not bubble. This is where you can use event capturing. So one of the few cases where you can use event capturing is for events that do not bubble. So here I can come to my event listener, and as a second argument I can pass an options where I have capture true. The idea of capture true, if we come back to this diagram, is if this div should have capture true, that means as this event is coming down, it will be captured on this div, and then after this div has handled the event, then the event would continue to the target, and then it can bubble back to the top. So because the error event can be captured, I can capture it on this div, and now if I come here and I refresh, you see this is a broken image, so we set the default image. This is a broken image, we set the default image. This is a broken image, we set the default image. And this way I can have 1000 images, but I only have 1 event listener on the parent that the 1000 images share. One more thing I want to add in this video though, which was a question I also got on Instagram, was what if the default image fails to load? Now this was going to happen. Let's say for this default image I had a broken link too, or it just didn't load for a reason. We're going to have this infinite error event triggered. So the error event is triggered the first time because this is a broken link, but then we try to set a default image which is also broken, so the error event is triggered constantly. There are several ways you can handle this, but let me show you one way. So here I'm going to say event.target.old source is equals to event.target.src. So I'm adding a new attribute, old source, so that I can remember that I have changed the source of this image. Then we now change the source to be this default image. But since I have this old source, I can check if event.target.old source exists. That means I have visited or I have tried to handle this image before. So in that case, I can return. But then if it doesn't exist, then I can add the old source, update the source of the image, and add my class list. And now when I refresh, you see we no longer have that infinite error event triggered. The error event is triggered the first time for this image. We have the old source, so we don't need to trigger it again if the default image doesn't work. I hope this video gives you an example of how you can use event capturing. It is rarely used when building JavaScript applications, but while I was working on this demo, I found out that this is actually a good use case. Let me know what you think in the comments. And also, if you want to learn more about event capturing and event bubbling or event delegation, I have videos on that and you can check them in the comments section.